The girl found a letter from 30 years ago in the box. The years had dyed the letter yellow. After reading it, she found that it was a love letter her mother had received. It was these long-forgotten letters that made her know the love story between her mother and another man. In the summer of 1968, the daughter of a congressman came to the countryside to escape the summer heat and happened to meet a group of boys playing by the river. Her figures seemed like the sunshine in summer, which instantly stunned the boys. The boys standing in front waved to welcome her, but Ji-hye responded generously. The light movement was like a breeze blowing through their hearts, instantly igniting the fire in their hearts. Originally thought it was just a passing encounter, who would have thought that the starting point of this fate was like the river that kept flowing, destined to never stop. When Junha squatted in the cow dung pile to look for insects, he was completely unaware that there was an elegant girl standing behind him. Ji-hye not only did not dislike his dirty hands, but was deeply attracted by his sincere smile, so she invited him to explore the other side of the river together. Although Junha was born timid, he could not help but accept her invitation when he saw Ji-hye's beautiful smile. After that, they agreed to meet at the pier at 12 noon tomorrow. Like a princess casting a romantic magic, the arrival of the girl caused ripples in the calm lake in Junha's heart. Early the next morning, Ji-hye hurried to the riverside with great expectations. As expected, when she saw Junha, who had been waiting for a long time, the immaturity of first love was fully revealed at this moment. There was no need for the two to say much, but the moment their eyes met, they could feel the happy smiles on each other's faces. The haunted house exploration was just an excuse to meet, and the real purpose was the heart-pounding date. Although the atmosphere of the haunted house made Junha feel terrified, he pretended to be calm and took Ji-hye into the haunted house with him because he had a beautiful woman by his side. As the atmosphere of terror intensified, he was soon frightened and screamed loudly and fled in a hurry. When he escaped from the haunted house, he suddenly realized that Ji-hye was still in danger. It turned out that this place called a haunted house was actually just a temporary shelter for wanderers. Perhaps God intended to test this young couple in their first love and specially arranged an episode. When the sky was overcast and their faces were solemn, a torrential rain poured down. Just as they were about to row home, the boat floated to the middle of the river like a fallen leaf. All this seemed to be a clever arrangement of fate. In desperation, they had to choose to take a long detour to another pier. While walking on the slippery forest path, Ji-hye accidentally slipped and sprained her foot. Junha was heartbroken when he saw this and immediately carried her on his back and continued to move forward. However, due to the bad weather, they had to stay in a melon shed temporarily. Junha wrung out his coat intimately, let Ji-hye wipe off the rain, and gently comforted her that he would escort her home safely. A few warm words made Ji-hye feel at ease, even though they were not familiar with each other. However, at this time and place, Junha was like her hero, protecting her in the wind and rain. When the raindrops gradually became sparse, Junha picked fresh watermelons again. He broke it directly with his hands, and his rough movements showed pure sincerity. Even though Ji-hye had been living a life of luxury since she was a child and had tasted all the precious fruits in the world. But the piece of watermelon that was casually broken at the moment made her taste the incomparable sweetness. In the interweaving of fog and rain, a colorful rainbow crossed the sky, forming a beautiful, colorful lake. Just like the strings of their hearts, they become soft and lingering after being baptized by wind and rain. When the stars dotted the night sky, Junha carried his beloved girl on his back and walked along the path of love. The night should have been as quiet as water, but it was broken by the beating of each other's hearts. Intertwined lightly, slowly growing full of warmth. Until the bright moon rose, they finally came to the familiar wooden bridge of the pier. In the night sky, countless fireflies flickered like stars, attracting Ji-hye's attention. This was a wonder she had never seen under the neon lights of the city. Those faint but beautiful light spots were more moving than stars and more shy than roses. Junha entered the water and gently held up a star falling from the sky. The faint light spot was like the starlight in his deep eyes, warm and focused, full of affection and persistence. The girl in front of him was the most charming scenery he had ever seen in his life. But good times are always so short. When they hurried home, Ji-hye's tribesmen were waiting on the shore. She knew that this date would be difficult to get the approval of the family. Ji-hye didn't want this deep affection to disappear, nor did she want to leave any regrets. So she gave her cherished necklace to Junha. Because in the unknown future, this separation may become very long, and this relationship can only end sadly in the shackles of reality. Ji-hye was taken away by the servants, wearing a warm blanket. What was waiting for Junha was a loud slap from Ji-hye's grandfather. In fact, Junha also understood that Ji-hye was a daughter of a prominent family. And he was just an inconspicuous boy in the countryside. How dare he dream of being with Ji-hye? Despite this, Ji-hye still deeply attracted Junha. The sudden heavy rain made Ji-hye sick. She was rushed back to the city for treatment at night and never came back. Junha regarded this relationship as the most beautiful regret in his life. Although he often missed it, he did not feel sad. But his fate with Ji-hye was far from over because Junha was often asked by his friends to write letters with his superb writing skills. When his close friend Tae-soo asked him to write a love letter, Junha instinctively agreed. However, the recipient of the love letter turned out to be Tae-soo's fiancé. Tae-soo confessed that he had no love for his fiancé, and the engagement was arranged by both fathers, and they had never even met each other. Then, Tae-soo took out a photo of his fiancé and handed it to Junha. When he saw the photo, Junha was completely dumbfounded because that was Ji-hye whom he met by chance on that rainy night. Although his heart was in turmoil, he did not reveal his acquaintance with Ji-hye, but wrote a love letter for Tae-soo as usual. But this time he was particularly serious, interweaving emotions and words and pouring all his thoughts, regrets, sadness, and melancholy for Ji-hye into every font. When he handed the love letter to Tae-soo, Tae-soo was completely impressed by Junha's talent. In order to repay Junha, Tae-soo decided to perform a stunt. Soon, the teacher was attracted by the noise and he scolded the two to clean the office immediately. After receiving Ji-hye's reply, Tae-soo couldn't help but cheer loudly and rushed to the library to find Junha, completely ignoring the eyes of the people around him. Because Ji-hye not only replied to him politely, but also sent 2 tickets to invite him to watch the concert together. As soon as Ji-hye came on stage, Junha couldn't help but stand up and followed Ji-hye's every move with affectionate eyes. However, Ji-hye, who was concentrating on the performance, didn't notice Junha's existence. Looking at Ji-hye's familiar and beautiful face, the longing and desire deep in his heart surged like a tide. And the melody played by Ji-hye's piano piece was inexplicably full of sadness. As soon as the performance ended, Ji-hye immediately became the focus of the elder's attention. But when she looked back, she saw Junha waiting with flowers in her hands, and she felt a strong excitement in her heart. However, the reality was that she could not recognize Junha immediately, and she could only leave with the elders with regret. Junha sat on the bench, his heart filled with an irrepressible sense of loss. He was alone in his sadness, and suddenly a beautiful figure ran out of the hall. This made him suddenly realize that the old love had not yet come to an end. Ji-hye looked for Junha with expectation, but failed to find him in the crowd. At the same time, Junha was running towards the deep desire in his heart. When they met in the mottled light and shadow of the sun, all words became unimportant, and their eyes and smiles were enough to convey their deep affection for each other. This long-awaited reunion, even the deep love is accompanied by the sadness of reunion. After a brief greeting, both parties stared at each other quietly for a long time, and their hearts could not calm down for a long time. Junha's love was strong, but at this time he could only show his true feelings. He could not hide his joy and danced with excitement, and even showed his joy after a funny fall. After that, he remained Tae-soo's loyal writer. And when the sun fell freely, the words on the tip of the nose seemed to become warmer. At the social dance organized by the school, he met Ji-hye again. In order not to attract the attention of the people around him, Ji-hye pretended not to know Junha. Despite this, every look and expression of theirs could not hide their care for each other. After sitting down, their eyes met, and they conveyed their deep affection tacitly, which could be understood without words. At the party, every movement they made while dancing quietly expressed implicit emotions. Love is like a flower that grows in the dark, without the sun. It can bloom with the nourishment of rain alone, full of fragrance, and warm everything around it. As the party came to an end, Junha watched Tae-soo and Ji-hye return, and an irrepressible reluctance surged in his heart. Ji-hye also felt regretful after saying goodbye to Junha. She hesitated in front of the door and looked back frequently to find the expected figure. Just as she rang the doorbell, the light suddenly flickered in it. She looked for the sound again, and suddenly looked back, and found that the person was at the end of the lights. This moment was undoubtedly the ultimate romance, and the two hearts full of love came into contact silently again. They spent countless throbbing moments and ran wildly on the steps full of love, kissed under the dim light, and leaned on each other to vent happiness and express emotions. Although their love is as hot as fire, it can never get the recognition of the world because Ji-hye's fate has been arranged by the family. Although Junha comforted her and said that there must be a way to solve it, he was also unsure in his heart. After a long time together, Tae-soo never thought that he would be moved by Ji-hye inadvertently. He held a bouquet of flowers and confessed to Ji-hye with trepidation, but this sudden emotion made Ji-hye confused and uneasy. She knew that her heart had already belonged to Junha, and the relationship between her and Tae-soo was a barrier that could not be avoided or changed. In the end, in order to stop hurting Junha or letting Tae-soo fall into deeper pain, Ji-hye decided to break up with Junha reluctantly. She hoped to cut off the emotional ties with decisive words so that both of them could get out of the quagmire of this relationship. But at night, Junha would still come to see her secretly. Although Ju-hye's tears fell silently and the firefly was still flickering, she could no longer hide her meeting with Junha from Tae-soo. On a pouring rainy night, Junha stood in the rain, waiting for Ju-hye to change her mind, just like when they first met. However, Ju-hye did not give him any chance. She suppressed the pain in her heart, tried to control her emotions, and resolutely let Junha leave. Ju-hye just handed something to Junha and turned away without looking back. At that moment, Junha's mood was like being completely drowned by the sudden rainstorm, like a boat wet by rain and swaying in the wind and waves. But Junha did not give up because of being rejected. He stood in front of Ju-hye's door and kept waving the streetlight. When Ju-hye passed by Junha, she said that his behavior was like that of a fool. Despite this, Junha was still unwilling to end this relationship and tried to hold Ju-hye. But Ju-hye was determined and said that no effort could change the status quo. Even though this feeling was so deep and sincere, it still did not win Ju-hye's response in the end. Junha realized that their love might be doomed to be incomplete. Their encounter was like a brief encounter with a shooting star. After a flash of brilliance under the night sky, it quickly fell into silent darkness and soon disappeared without a trace. As the brilliance in the night sky faded, all that was left was the unrealized love and the deep pain in their hearts. These emotions poured in like a flood, gradually filling their hearts and bodies. Even the strongest love could not stop the ruthlessness of fate. Faced with this ruthless reality, Junha decided to open his heart to Tae-soo. He hoped to end it all with Tae-soo's punch. But Tae-soo refused without thinking because he had already seen through the relationship between Junha and Ju-hye. Tae-soo knew that Ju-hye's feelings were not connected with him, so he chose to fulfill her. Even in order to help Ju-hye and Junha's relationship, he still asked Junha to write a letter for him. And Ju-hye also knew everything from the letter. In the past, the carriages were slow and the journey was long, and each letter was filled with emotions. They expressed their love through letters and shared every bit of life with rich and sincere emotions. Each paragraph was full of affection, as if they could hear each other's breathing and heartbeat. From then on, every weekend, Ju-hye looked forward to going to the post office the most, which carried all her lovesickness and expectations. However, lies will always be exposed one day. A letter that should have been delivered to Ju-hye was mistakenly sent back to Tae-soo's home. Tae-soo's father was furious when he learned the truth. He thought that the daughter of a wealthy family whom he had tried so hard to get close to would slip away because of his son's deep love. His anger was like a volcanic eruption and could not be calmed down. On impulse, he picked up the belt. Although Tae-soo begged and tried to explain the truth of the matter, his father still mercilessly hit him with the belt. The father's anger was like a disaster that swallowed everything, and the uncontrollable anger ended the conversation between father and son. The next day, when Junha was reading quietly, Tae-soo suddenly threw the belt on the table and began to fiercely condemn his father's atrocities, telling his own suffering and hatred for it. He half-jokingly asked Junha how to take revenge on his father, and Junha also answered him in a joking way. "I was thinking of hanging him." Tae-soo responded, "This is a great idea." Unexpectedly, it was these jokes that plunged Junha into the abyss of regret and self-blame. After saying goodbye to Junha, Tae-soo secretly came to the infirmary and hung a farewell letter on his chest. With a relaxed smile on his face, he resolutely followed his inner choice. Junha, who came later, found that there was no Tae-soo on the bed, and a deep sense of uneasiness surged in his heart. He looked around anxiously, but in the blink of an eye, he found a horrible scene. Junha regretted it. He originally thought it was just a joke, but it turned out to be a farewell on the cliff of Tae-soo's life. Although Tae-soo finally saved his life, it did not alleviate Junha's guilt. When Ju-hye came to visit, Junha's heart sank into the abyss of sadness again. The three of them were once the most intimate friends, and they understood each other tacitly. Who would have thought that they would end up with such a sad ending? When Junha fantasized about Tae-soo in a coma and Ju-hye in tears, the grief in his heart surged like a tide. He could no longer suppress the heavy emotions and silently decided that maybe he was the one who should leave. He didn't want this complicated relationship to continue to hurt more people. When Ju-hye turned around, Junha had quietly disappeared from sight, and only the necklace symbolizing the eternal oath was left on the door handle. Ju-hye hurriedly chased out, but found that Junha had disappeared. He thought it was just a short departure, but Junha seemed to have evaporated from the face of the earth, leaving no trace. It was not until a long time later that Ju-hye ran into Tae-soo, who had recovered. It turned out that in order to stay away from all the painful memories, Junha decided to sign up for the army, trying to heal his inner pain through time and distance. Ju-hye pushed through many obstacles in the vast crowd, and under the clever arrangement of fate, she met Junha again as she wished. Junha tried her best to force herself not to respond to Ju-hye's affectionate call. The pain in her heart was like being hit by a heavy hammer, intense and heavy. He knew that the emotion born out of fate had completely lost its possibility of continuing, and he could not face it or respond to it. However, when he saw the tears in Ji-hye's eyes, his heart was in pain, as if every tear was tearing his heart apart, and the pain and sadness were intertwined. Outside the window, Ji-hye kept calling Junha's name and knocking hard on the window, but he never got any response from Junha. At this time, the train started slowly, and Ji-hye tried to hold back tears, still hoping to get a response from Junha. When Junha's eyes finally fell on Ji-hye, he could no longer suppress his inner longing. Junha moved forward step by step, just to see Ji-hye more. It was not until he came to the door of the train that he finally shortened the distance between him and Ji-hye. After receiving the necklace from Ji-hye, Junha waved goodbye, and Ji-hye could only watch him disappear from sight from afar. That necklace is more than just an ornament. It is also a lucky charm full of affection and blessings. Junha put the necklace that symbolizes infinite hope around his neck and resolutely embarked on the journey of war. However, he soon regretted his decision to join the army. Because he was facing a group of meaningless soldiers, the outcome of this war seemed to end in a tragic defeat. The cruelty of the battlefield was far beyond his imagination. Soon after the battle began, Junha's team was defeated. During the retreat, he found that his beloved necklace fell on the battlefield. He immediately returned to the battlefield without hesitation, justifying that hope. Fate allowed Junha to cleverly avoid bullets one after another, and luckily found the precious necklace. But the price he paid was extremely heavy, just at the last moment when he thought he could retreat safely. A landmine exploded suddenly, causing him to go blind and fall into a coma. Despite this, his hand was still tightly holding the necklace at the last moment. This was not only his belief in survival, but also an indestructible emotional connection with Ji-hye. After being discharged from the army, Junha immediately invited Ji-hye to reunite. The two looked at each other, each with complicated emotions in their hearts. Ji-hye had suppressed her thoughts for many years and finally found an outlet at this moment. There was a deep love in her eyes. Junha praised her for being as beautiful as before, but then told her the news that he was married. Ji-hye's heart trembled when she heard the words. Her eyes showed loss and sadness, and tears inadvertently wet her cheeks. This sudden news made the joy of reunion dim suddenly. Perhaps sensing the awkwardness in the air, Junha hurriedly changed the subject. He casually mentioned the piano doll next to him, saying that it was exquisitely crafted, but the doll had already been moved to the side by a little boy. Ji-hye was a little surprised, but Junha didn't seem to notice at all and continued to talk to himself. Ji-hye subconsciously waved in front of him, but found that Junha didn't see her movements at all. At this moment, Ji-hye finally understood something and couldn't stop crying. Junha was still reminiscing about the past, but Ji-hye's heart seemed to be trapped in an endless abyss and couldn't extricate itself. Ji-hye said, "She is crying now, can't you see it?" Then, Ji-hye asked him why he concealed the fact that he was blind. Junha realized that his blindness had been exposed, and he hurriedly tried to leave. But the deep darkness around him made him lose his way, and he finally stumbled and fell to the ground. Ji-hye witnessed this scene, feeling powerless and sad. She tried her best to hold back her tears, gently helped Junha up, her eyes full of deep regret and pain. Junha held back her tears and said, "I'm sorry, I was almost perfect just now, and I almost succeeded. I even came here to practice for a long time last night." In deep sadness, Junha slowly took out the necklace full of memories. He wanted to return the necklace, but Ji-hye explained that the necklace belonged to you. Hearing this, Junha could no longer suppress his emotions. Even in the dark, he tried to feel the outline of Ji-hye through touch. In the end, Ji-hye obeyed her family's arrangement and married Tae-soo. But only she understood the meaning behind the burning tears in her eyes. It was a surge of emotions, a fierce wave hidden under the calm surface. After marriage, Ji-hye welcomed a lovely daughter Ji-hye and often took Ji-hye to the river where she met Junha. Alone in the memories of the past, sadness followed her like a shadow. That day, she was still immersed in endless thoughts, but was suddenly stopped by several of Junha's comrades. The moment she turned around, tears welled up in her eyes, and the sadness made her speechless, and tears burst out instantly. The comrade said Junha hoped that Ji-hye would scatter his ashes into the river, and Junha got married after Ji-hye got married, and Junha died of depression with only one son left. The person she loved deeply eventually became a wisp of blue ash in the wind, sinking into the place where their love story began. His existence nourishes everything like meridians, and it is endless, and continues to tell the passionate love story in reincarnation. Ji-hye pointed to the horizon, and Ji-hye followed her gaze. She suddenly showed a brilliant smile, because the colorful neon seemed like a corner of heaven, as if Junha was there and looking at her. She seemed to feel his warmth and protection in this illusory world. At the end of the story, Ji-hye sat on a bench and told the story of this past love. But when Ji-hye came to her senses, she found that her boyfriend had already burst into tears. Ji-hye thought that the boyfriend in front of her was deeply moved by this complicated love story. It was not until he slowly took off the necklace that Ji-hye suddenly realized that the boyfriend in front of her was actually Junha's son. It turned out that their meeting was destined. This was not only the arrangement of fate, but also to make up for the regrets and unfinished love of their parents. Junha and Ju-hye's love has gone through many twists and turns and finally came to perfection under the guidance of fate. Because love has its own will. Because true love is destined not to be defeated by the barriers of time and space, it can bind two people in love tightly together. That quiet night, they held hands and returned to the river decorated by fireflies. Under the faint light, the boyfriend plucked up the courage to step into the river to catch the twinkling star. At that moment, time seemed to flow backwards, and the romantic moment of Ju-hye and Junha in the past reappeared. All the unspoken love quietly overflowed in their affectionate gaze, turning into dazzling stars, dotted in each other's sky. Well, today's movie sharing is here. Welcome to like, comment, and forward thank you for your patience in watching. Looking forward to meeting you next time.